So now let's layer it. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna separate what we would consider the back from the sides. So from this point on, after we've established the line, it becomes all about actually protecting the line. And what we have to consider is, since we're working with a side part, we need to have a certain sense of balance between how the layers fall, how they're situated. With curly hair expands. After it's dry, it doesn't just sit down flat. It starts to live out here somewhat. So we have to actually determine where we want to position the weight and how to actually take her natural parting into account, so she has a nice even balance on each side. So by placing my comb at the top of the head, I can find the apex, the highest point. The apex is actually directly in line with the top of the ear, the weakest point of the hairline, the highest point right there. So by starting at that point, I'm ensuring that I've protected the line. If my priority is keeping this line protected, I should start at the most challenging spot. So I've taken a vertical section from the apex to the top of the ear, and when I pull this section out, I can see this steep buildup of weight, which is our line, right? So what I need to do is actually make a determination of which point can I actually start to incorporate this technique to affect this vertical dimension without risking the strength of the line. So it's always best to play it safe. You can always cut more off, you can't put more on. So I'm at the parietal ridge right now, right? But I need to drop some of this hair down and take an honest look at it. Think about whether, when I look at it in the mirror, whether that line feels protected, because that's the weakest point. So I've got enough contributing onto that line to where I feel pretty good about it. And now I need to determine what I actually want to happen technique-wise.
Sam Loves Hair asked a question, just a question in general about cutting on head blocks, because I'm currently practicing on one, it's not going well. I'm also coming off 7 months maternity leave, so maybe it's just me.
Cutting on head what?
On head blocks.
Head blocks. What's a head block?
I think what you're cutting on?
So like a doll head?
That's what I'm assuming. So just a question in general about cutting on head blocks, ... because I'm currently practicing on one and it's not going well. I'm also coming off 7 months maternity leave, so maybe it's just me.
Well, this was always my feeling around it, is like if you can nail a haircut on a doll head, then doing it on the real thing is going to be a piece of cake in a lot of ways, because doll heads are not very forgiving depending on the quality of the doll head. The hair isn't always the nicest, isn't the best. So when you're looking for that very organic type of feel, it can be very tricky, very challenging. Also, the actual, if you want to call it like the skin, it has no give. Like when I push my blade into it, a normal person's skin will depress, whereas this doesn't. So when you're going for like refining, like making a line look perfect, it's super challenging on a doll head. But I think the more you can just get your hands in there and go through some of the mechanics and the motions, and the more you subject yourself to good quality information, the better off you're going to be. And then maybe you won't have the sort of anxiety of coming back to it as a behind the chair stylist. Okay, so just to recap where I'm at right now. I started at the apex. I took a vertical section. I elevated above the parietal and I followed the contour of the head shape. From that point, I pulled everything back to number one. So I've got a stationary guide. So it's falling triangular when you look at it horizontally. If I was in the salon, I would most likely have my mirror to my right, because that would actually allow me to see where I'm over directing the hair to and whether I'm staying on my base. Now, just to give myself a quick cross check. as I pull this out, I want to see that it's in fact getting longer towards the front. Okay. So I've done this little front section, but now I'm going to hop over to this side so that we can start to create a sense of balance.
Sam Loves Hair said, thank you, I'll keep practicing. So looking forward to getting back behind the chair after COVID and maternity leave. Thanks.
Okay, so on this side, I know that my lengths have to be different. A really easy visual, and this can help make it click for some people, is if you consider where the center is. This side part is this far away from the natural center. So that means that this side has to be that much longer when it falls, and when you actually pull these lengths up, you want to see a difference in length because of the distance that this side has to actually travel. This side doesn't have nearly as much area to travel. So if I pick these lengths up and they are the exact same length, when they fall, you'll have this side, which is the short side, and then you'll have this side, which is actually the longer side. So it's like this side's having all the fun, and this side's like the side that was forgotten about.
I have a question from Sarah Ann Warden. How would you approach a hairline with missing spots, whether it be breakage, self-trims, or shitty haircuts?
A hairline with missing spots. So that means that maybe there's some transparency happening throughout. Maybe layers aren't the best idea for them. Maybe you want to get them to a point of more strength to their haircut. So think more like a one length or a bob with graduation, where you're just complementing the line with a little bit of bevel rather than living in this sort of expanded universe where all the short stuff's happening. Maybe you want to steer them in a direction where you can make their hair feel actually thicker. So my approach is relatively the same on this side as far as letting some of this drop out. And I need to make a determination of where I actually start to cut and what my cutting line looks like. I know that this side needs to be a little shorter than what lives over here, and a good visual you can do is you can actually stretch this up and get kind of an idea of where your cutting line needs to be in order to get you there. And it doesn't have to happen in the first cut. You can always cut a little more if you need to. So I'm going to pull this up and stretch it and kind of get an idea of where these lengths are at, and I need to take a little more off of this side. Not a ton, but a little more. Now at this point, when I pick these lengths up, I have probably a better concept or idea of creating that sense of balance, considering the extra distance that this side has to travel. If I had my mirror in front of me, I would be looking at how this looks after I start to play with it. Consider maybe a little more needs to come off. So from this point, I'm going to bring each of these subsequent sections back to number one. And my mirror would be to my right. And I would actually look in the mirror to see where I'm sending this hair to.
Hey, Marie Chivetta said you're making me really miss cutting now.
I know, we all miss it. And the way I prefer to do it, I like to jump around a little bit and work in these small areas, because being a behind the chair stylist and coming up with these concepts for people can be a little nerve-wracking. It can feel stressful, but if you dial in this one area and you're like, okay, I like how that's looking. Okay, now I'm gonna move over to this area, or I'm gonna move over to that area. You find these ways to actually take a little bit of the anxiety around this whole process. It's a big undertaking to affect someone's aesthetic. Okay, so now I'm making my way towards the center back. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna follow the head shape, and I'm not gonna use any over direction. So if you consider what that's actually gonna do, it's gonna get shorter as we make our way to the back.
Sarah and Warden asked, so we are cutting with precision yet allowing for personal touches?
Yeah, I think if anything, the amount of tension that you're using in this process is going to affect how the curl looks, the overall aesthetic of the curl, how much it jumps. But there's nothing to say that after you've styled her hair and you see her curls in all their glory, you can come through and you can personalize it a little bit if you'd like to.
She added, I'm just trying to annoy Aaron.
No, I love the questions. I think that's actually a really good question. If I was in the salon, the mirror would be to my right, so I could see that I wasn't pushing the hair forward, that I'm using no over direction, that I'm simply following head shape.
Sarah asked, so when you cut with high tension, what are you trying to achieve?
More spring back, more jump up. That's great for the times where you really want to see the most volume that you can within a haircut. So it's kind of awkward for me, but as we're making our way to the crown, it's slightly shorter and it's progressively getting longer towards the front. And now I just have this little back section on my left side. And what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna take a horizontal section that connects what's living at the apex to what we have living in the crown. Now at this point, I'm over directing everything back, everything forward, I should say, to the apex. This is where I find that this is a little bit of a cheat in terms of what I'm creating horizontally. Because another way to approach this would be to start in the back. So in the crown area, you create your horizontal shape, gets you started. Then you start to actually make your way towards the apex, and after you reach the apex, that's where the length differences begin. So if you guys understand that, you've got the same length through the sides until you reach the top of the head. But in this instance, I've used that peak of the head to start my variation in lengths. And now I'm working backwards on this shallow side to match up with the length in the center back of the crown.